focus on prison reform. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be here, Jill.
When we talk about the corrections system in Pennsylvania, let's focus first on the growth of this system in the Commonwealth over the past 2 decades.
If you look at, it's almost unbelievable how fast our prison system has grown in terms of the number of inmates. Going back to 1980, for example, we used to have roughly several thousand prisoners, 5,000 prisoners or so in the system. We've got 50,000 now. The costs for maintaining our prison system have gone up by 500% since 1980. We're spending 17 times more on prisons than we did back in 1980. And yet the results for society haven't, it's called a correction system, but we haven't really been correcting. We've been actually, in many cases, investing in making folks who are maybe nonviolent offenders who end up in the state prison system, they get in that environment for a couple of years and they learn how to become violent, hardcore criminals. So we've actually had a negative impact on society, and yet we're spending more and more on the prison system instead of being smart.
There's an interesting coalition that's come together now in terms of looking at this issue. Talk to us about what's happening right now in Harrisburg in terms of stakeholders coming together.
It's really fascinating, Jill, because folks like me, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm concerned about the costs that are driving our Pennsylvania budget higher and higher every year. And certainly corrections is one of those. We're spending about $2 billion now a year on corrections. So for some folks like me, fiscal hawks, fiscal conservatives, yet you have some of the folks on the very liberal other side of the aisle who have come alongside of us on this same issue because they see the same thing we see. People actually being harmed by the correction system the way it is now. So whether you come at it from a social improvement perspective or a fiscal conservatism perspective, there's this fascinating bipartisan coalition that's come around Secretary Wetzel, who's done an excellent job in really promoting the idea that we need to do this smarter in Pennsylvania. You know, it's one thing to say you're going to be tough on crime, which I'm all for, but we don't want to be stupid about it. We don't want to make the problem worse.
Let's focus on some of the things that can be done. You mentioned this is a cost driver in Pennsylvania year over year in terms of the annual budget. But long term, what are some of the things that can be done to address corrections in Pennsylvania in terms of assessing offenders on an individual basis? Because you're talking about individuals that make up the system.
We've got in the 21st century, we've got statistical tools, assessment models. Like insurance companies assess risk and they can predict the risk in a given pool, we now have tools that we can on an individual basis predict the down the road impact on any one particular prisoner. So we need to look at adjudications and cases and say, hey, is this person going to end up being more of a threat to society if we send them to the State Correctional Institute than if we can find some kind of an alternative program to perhaps nip that criminal lifestyle in the bud? So if we can use better risk assessment tools, which some other states are doing, we can drastically reduce the number of folks we actually have to incarcerate while, again, continuing to make sure the dangerous offenders are in jail behind bars. We can reduce costs and we can improve the outcome for those individuals and for the people who are going to live around. They're going to live in my neighborhood or your neighborhood someday. We want them to be safe, productive members of society. So risk assessment's huge, and also making sure they get appropriate treatment. Many prisoners, as you know, have addiction issues, drugs, alcohol, and so forth. So it's key that we're going to make sure they get the proper treatment while they're in the system so that they don't end up going right back to the lifestyle that they were in before they got into prison.
And we just have a short time left, but you say technology and electronic monitoring can play into this as well.
Right, we can use, again, other states are doing this very effectively. With folks who are not a threat to society, we can use today's tools, electronics, monitoring, satellite technology, all those things to make sure that these folks are abiding by the restrictions that we put on them, not a threat to society, but not taking up a bed in a prison at $35,000 per year per prisoner that we simply can't afford in this state any longer.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jill.
We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. I'm Jill Horner for Comcast Newsmakers.